Why your evening doesn't restore you. You gave yourself the evening. Nothing scheduled, nothing required. You sat down, you switched off, you did what you were supposed to do. And somehow, by 9 o'clock, you feel worse than you did when you walked in the door. Not more tired in your body, something else. Something the sofa didn't fix. Here's the thing. Rest isn't one thing. It's several. And only one of them responds to sitting still. By the end of this episode, you'll have a clearer sense of which kind of tired you are at the end of your day. And something concrete to try tonight. You're listening to Your Space Today, the podcast where we decode fatigue, stress, and burnout so you can rise again. Every Tuesday, we explore the hidden connections between your habits, your health, and your happiness, giving you the tools to take back your energy and your life. Most people who do demanding work have a version of Sarah's evening. Sarah is 44. She manages a team of 11. Her job title says operations manager, but what the title doesn't capture is what the job is in practice. She's the person everyone comes to for decisions, for reassurance, for a particular tone of calm when things are going sideways. She reads the temperature of every meeting within 30 seconds of walking in and adjusts accordingly. She holds her own reactions back when someone needs her to stay steady. She does all of this without thinking of it as effort. She just thinks of it as Tuesday. By 6 o'clock, she's had 9 conversations that required something of her. 3 of them were difficult. She handled all of them well. She gets home, sits down, puts something on in the background, and waits to feel better. An hour passes. She doesn't. She feels strange, restless in a way she can't locate, quiet in a way that doesn't feel like peace. She's not tired in her body. Her body barely moved all day. She's tired in a way that sitting still doesn't seem to touch. She puts it down to needing a good night's sleep. What's worth understanding, and what most people in her position have never had the chance to think about, is that there are different kinds of tired. Most of us know physical fatigue well, the body after a long day on your feet, after a run, after something that genuinely demanded the muscles. That kind responds well to rest, to stillness, to sitting down. But there are at least 3 other kinds that don't respond the same way. Mental fatigue, the depletion that comes from sustained concentration, decision-making, holding competing priorities in your head across a full working day. Emotional fatigue, the cost of managing your own internal state while presenting a different one to the people around you. And social fatigue, the specific, measurable neural cost of reading other people all day, tracking their reactions, adjusting to them, anticipating how a room is going to move before it moves. For many people in Sarah's kind of role, physical fatigue is the smallest part of the problem. The other 3 are where the real debt builds. And the rest they reach for in the evening, stillness, passive consumption, the sofa, is calibrated almost entirely for the first kind. In a few minutes, I'll walk you through a practical 3-step sequence you can try tonight. But first, let me show you what's happening inside that exhaustion. Because it's more specific than it feels. And once you see it, the evening starts to make a different kind of sense. There's research from occupational psychology that most people in demanding jobs have never come across. But that tends to describe their experience very precisely. It makes a distinction between 2 ways of managing how you come across emotionally at work. The first is where your internal state and your displayed state are aligned. You're patient because you genuinely feel patient. You're warm because you genuinely feel warm. The second is where they're not. You're frustrated, but you stay steady. You're depleted, but you project energy. You're somewhere else entirely, but the meeting requires your full presence. Researchers call this surface acting, and what numerous studies consistently show is that this second mode is significantly more depleting than the first. Not because the performance is difficult in itself, but because maintaining the gap between what you feel and what you show is a continuous act of self-regulation. And self-regulation draws on something that is genuinely finite. The social dimension compounds this. Reading people is not a passive activity. The brain has dedicated circuitry for it, specific regions whose job is to model what another person is thinking, feeling, and likely to do next. And for someone who has spent 8 hours in that mode, adjusting tone, tracking reactions, anticipating the room, those circuits arrive at 6 o'clock running on very little. This is why being around people in the evening can feel genuinely impossible for someone who has been people-focused all day. It's not unsociability, it's a specific kind of depletion. The circuits are simply spent. And there's a third thing happening underneath both of these, quieter and almost never talked about. The brain monitors the body constantly. Temperature, tension, hunger, physical discomfort. It uses that information to regulate mood, decisions, the general sense of how things are going. But in a day like Sarah's, those signals get systematically overridden. Hunger ignored because the meeting ran over, shoulders tightening without anyone noticing, least of all her, because the conversation needed her full attention. The body was there all day. The brain just wasn't attending to it. By evening, the brain is working from a picture of the body that's hours out of date. And this contributes to that unnamed unease, the sense that something is off, but there's nothing concrete to point to. The body trying to update a brain that's still pointed outward. Think of it like a phone that's been running intensive applications all day. Calls, maps, constant connectivity. The battery is depleted, but the screen looks fine. Turning the screen off doesn't charge the components that ran down. And if the depletion is specific rather than general, then much of what we reach for in the evening is built for the wrong problem. Let me show you why that matters. The issue isn't the amount of rest. It's the match. Stillness is the right medicine for a body that's been physically active. For mental, emotional, and social depletion, stillness is largely neutral at best. At worst, it creates that particular uncomfortable quality of sitting with something unresolved and giving it nowhere to go. The restlessness Sarah feels on the sofa isn't impatience. It's 3 unaddressed fatigue types with nowhere to move. Passive content and scrolling don't resolve any of them. They hold the surface of attention just occupied enough to suppress the discomfort without giving the depleted systems what they need. There's a separate episode on what news and screen consumption do to an already depleted brain in the evening, and the picture there is more counterintuitive than most people expect. The most common piece of advice for exhausted people, connect with others, be around people you love, is also, for this specific kind of tired, often the wrong tool. It's offering the spent circuit more of the same work and calling it recovery. For someone who has spent the day reading and responding to other people, more social engagement in the evening is a bit like telling a runner with a sore leg to go for a jog. This is where the fuller picture comes into view, because the depletion doesn't stay neatly in one lane. There's also evidence that emotional depletion can quietly influence food choices in the evening. the brain reaching for fast energy when other restoration isn't available. Research on self-control as a limited resource suggests that when self-regulatory capacity is depleted through sustained emotional effort during the day, the ability to resist high-energy food choices in the evening is reduced. So what can feel like an evening craving or a willpower question may in part reflect a system that's been running on empty since long before dinner. The physical stillness of the day means the tension that built up never had anywhere to go. A body that was ignored and immobile all day arrives that evening still holding what it's been carrying. The way this connects to sleep quality and what happens overnight is worth understanding too, and there's another episode that goes into that in depth. What ties all of this together is that the evening hours are when genuine recovery should be happening. But for many people in demanding roles, the tools they reach for after 6 o'clock are either mismatched to what's depleted or quietly working against the transition into rest. These connections run deeper than one episode can cover, and if you want to explore how they show up in your own life, there are specific episodes linked in the show notes below that go into each thread in more detail. So the question becomes a practical one. What does an evening actually look like when it's built for the right kind of tired?
Here's how to work with this, step by step.
One thing worth saying up front, what follows isn't a clinical protocol. It's a practical sequence drawn from several different lines of research into fatigue, emotional processing, and how the brain tracks the body. Worth trying in the same spirit as any sensible adjustment. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it addresses something real and costs almost nothing. 3 steps. In order. The order matters. Step 1. The sensory reset. 5 minutes. Before anything else, give the brain a chance to update its picture of where the body is. Not through meditation, not through anything that requires a particular mindset or a tolerance for sitting quietly with your own thoughts. Many people in high-output roles find that kind of instruction either alienating or, honestly, a bit ridiculous. And that's a fair response when the brain has been pointed outward all day and is suddenly being asked to look inward with no warm-up. The version that tends to be more accessible for people who find body awareness practices completely foreign is simply this: a shower with slightly more attention than usual. Not a ritual, not a wellness practice, just the temperature of the water, the sound of it, which changes when it hits different surfaces, the weight of your feet on the floor, your shoulders and where they are right now, rather than where they've been holding themselves all afternoon. The goal isn't to achieve a particular state. It's to give the brain's sensory processing something concrete and present to work with, after a day of having it pointed at other people. Research into how the brain monitors the body suggests that this kind of specific, present-moment sensory attention, even briefly, helps reestablish the internal signal that's been quiet all day. 5 minutes. Something you're probably already doing. Step 2. The discharge. 10 minutes. The emotional residue of the day doesn't dissolve at 6 o'clock. It tends to sit in the system, still running, until it's given somewhere to land. Research into expressive writing, even brief acknowledgement of difficult experiences, suggests that acknowledgement works differently in the body than suppression does. Not analysis, not problem solving, just a moment of recognition before the day is closed. This can look like 3 sentences written in a notes app, never to be reread. 2 minutes in the car before going inside, just naming, quietly, what the day cost. It doesn't need to resemble journaling or therapy, The function is simply to give the open loops somewhere to land, so they're less likely to keep running in the background. Step 3. Type-matched rest. 20 to 30 minutes. Now, after the first two steps, the evening's rest. Matched as much as possible to what's depleted. For mental fatigue, the kind that comes from sustained concentration and decision-making, the brain tends to do well with something that absorbs attention without putting it in charge. A novel works well for many people. The mind is occupied, but following rather than leading. Cooking a familiar recipe. Instrumental music with enough texture to hold the ear. The shared quality across all of these, attention is gently occupied, not performing. For emotional and social fatigue, the more dominant depletion for many people in demanding roles, the specific need is something solitary and low demand that doesn't require reading another person. This is where options vary most, and it's worth trying a few things before concluding something doesn't work. Sketching or doodling with no output that matters. A puzzle. Something with the hands, a small repair, tending to a plant, anything physical and absorbing. A walk with no destination and no audio, where attention can wander to what's around rather than what's inside. What these share is that attention is going somewhere steady, under your own control, with no one on the other end of it. If it's genuinely unclear which kind of tired is dominant on a given evening, the sensory reset in step 1 often makes it clearer. The body, once attended to, tends to give a more reliable answer than an overworked mind asked to diagnose itself at the end of a long day. Sarah tried the shower on a Wednesday. Not because she was convinced, because she was tired enough to try something different. She stood in the water for 5 minutes, paying attention to the sound of it, rather than composing tomorrow's emails. The rest of the evening felt slightly different. Not restored, just less stuck. She started writing 3 sentences before bed. Not every night, on the nights that had cost her most. The evenings didn't transform, they became gradually slightly more hers. Thank you for listening. In the next episode, we look at something that follows from what we've talked about today. The more capable you become, the more aware you are of everything you don't yet know. The more senior the role, the more visible the gaps can feel. And when that awareness lands on a brain that's running on empty, because of exactly the kind of depletion we've been discussing, the result can feel very much like actual incompetence. The science explains why that feeling and the reality are often very far apart. That's next. Until then, take care of yourself. You deserve it. Your Space Today is published every Tuesday at 6 p.m. For detailed information, disclaimers, scientific references, visit the links below this podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your healthcare provider regarding any health concerns.